6, and maybe part 5. Like I can.
Okay. So keep coming.
I'm not sure how that happens.
Keep coming. It'll happen eventually. Am I in the? Am I in the camera? Is this a good place for me to stand?
I see your belt behind.
That's not so helpful. Yeah, I think you can actually raise. You can raise the.
Oh, this one. No, that's not.
No, not that. This right here.
Oh.
Just turn it. Like that. Is that better? Okay, I'm gonna start. In the last 2 classes, we did Roman numeral 1, A through H. Okay, so that's where I sort of want to sort of a very, where we left our story, history of the Torah, history of Halakha. We have the period of the Rishonim. We actually didn't finish H. We didn't finish the Rishonim. Actually, I'll get another book to another prop.
Is it yours?
So we talked about the period of the Rishonim. These are the medieval sages, medieval scholars. I told the story, which I'll tell again, of how this period of the Rishonim began. And there's a story of 4 rabbis who were on a mission from Babylonia, from the great Talmudic academies of Babylonia. They were traveling to the west, to North Africa, perhaps to Spain or to Italy, on a fundraising trip for these yeshivot. One of the yeshiva that sent them, or several yeshivot sent them. And they remember the Gaonic system. These were these academies in Babylonia that studied Talmud and taught Talmud, and they would send out questions and answers. She'elot u'tshuvot would come in and come out, using because they were near Baghdad in Babylonia, the center of the Islamic Empire. It was very easy for them to send and receive messages. This is when the Babylonian Talmud became the Talmud. And so one day, these 4 rabbis went on a boat on a fundraising mission on these traders, and they were captured by pirates, and they were ransomed by the Jewish communities in the West. The condition of the ransom was, they wouldn't go home, which is, I guess, kind of sad, but the deal was they would be ransomed from the pirates, and then they would stay in the West, and they would, kind of live there and be Torah teachers in the West. And so one went to Italy, and one went to North Africa, and one went to Spain, and this is the kind of foundation story of Jewish scholarship in the West. And over time, Jews stopped sending as many questions to Babylonia because they had Torah scholars there in the West who they felt were authoritative. And last time we spoke about some of those great codes of Jewish law that were written by the Rishonim. The Rishonim felt that they could read the Talmud and figure out what it meant sufficiently to derive new details of Jewish law that were not explicit in the Talmud itself. Okay, here's an example. I'll give you an example. If you know about some of the more details of the laws of Shabbat, which if you don't know eventually, keep coming, we'll learn it eventually, relatively soon. There's a rule called Ein Bishul Acher Bishul. You can't cook, something cannot be cooked after it's been cooked. Right? Meaning, one of the prohibitions on Shabbat is cooking, but if you have an item which is already cooked, and you somehow heat it up, and it gets, no matter how hot it gets, it won't be, you won't violate the prohibition of cooking. Because cooking happens once. It's like a one-way, one-time transformation. So once something's cooked, you can heat it in a certain way, and there are rules about how you heat it and when, etc. But you're not going to violate the prohibition of cooking on Shabbat if something's already cooked. Ein bishul acher bishul. This is nowhere said in the Talmud, nowhere explicitly. The Talmud has a few cases which the Rishonim, which the medieval Torah scholars derive from these cases, these examples in the Talmud, and say, oh, this is because Ein bishul acher bishul. But that phrase doesn't exist in the Talmud. That's the classic example of the Rishonim, of these medieval scholars, discovering, interpreting, deriving, uncovering, distilling legal concepts that are more opaque in the Talmud itself. The Rishonim felt empowered to do that. They felt confident in their ability to read the Talmud. They did that. So we talked about some of the great codes last time. Unfortunately, the video camera didn't work last time, but but the Rambam, the Torah, we spoke about that last time. In addition to writing great codes, the Rishonim also wrote great commentaries in the Talmud. I'll just mention sort of 2 stages in that. The commentary initiative of the Rishonim. Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, born in 1040, died 1105, lived most of his life in France, but he was a student in Germany in his youth. He wrote a line-by-line commentary on the Torah and all of Tanakh, all of the Hebrew Bible. The first Jewish book that was ever printed was a Chumash, a Pentateuch with Rashi's commentary. And from that first Hebrew book ever printed, first book ever printed by Jews, up until the 20th century, no Jew ever published a Hebrew Bible without Rashi's commentary, until the 20th century. In the 1950s, when Koren published a Tanakh without any commentaries. That was like, there were Christians who published Hebrew Bibles without any commentary, but Jews didn't. Rashi also wrote a commentary on the Talmud, basically line-by-line commentary on the Talmud. From the time that Rashi's line-by-line commentary on the Talmud, it's so good that once it spread to a Jewish community, I mean, it took a while before every corner of the diaspora had Rashi's commentary, but once they got it, no one else tried to write a Rashi-style commentary on the Talmud. So from Rashi, who died 1105, nobody else has ever written a line-by-line commentary on the Talmud until 2011, when Rabbi Steinsaltz finished his, commentary on the Talmud. So that's like a pretty long reign. Like, you have to be really good if no one else tries to do something for 800 years. It's not bad. The generation of Rashi's grandchildren, called the Tosafot, and they took Talmud scholarship to like the next level. It's called dialectic reasoning. Rashi would say, okay, here's what this, if you ever study Talmud, or here's what this word means, here's what this phrase means. He gives you the information you need to make sense of the Talmud. The Talmud is it's a challenging book to read because there's no punctuation, because it assumes you know everything. So it starts in the middle of a topic, assuming you know all the background information. Rashi gives you the scaffolding, just in very precise language. He won't use 6 words if he can use 5, and if he needs 5, he won't use 4. Just, this is what you need to know to get through the next line of the Talmud. What you get next line, here's what these words mean, here's the background information to understand this topic, fills in the gaps, holds your hand, guides you through the Talmud. Once you have that, it was left to the next generation, particularly his biological grandchildren and other scholars of that generation, to then say, oh, well, if the Talmud means this over here and says this over here, but in this other tractate over there's a similar topic addressed, and they seem to contradict each other, what do we do with that? And the noting of contradictions and the creative resolution of those, meaning resolving those contradictions in creative ways, discovering new information, new details, new meaning, that's dialectic reasoning. And in the 12th century, the Tosafists were doing it in Talmud scholarship. You also had people discovering dialectic in canon law and in sort of European civil law as well. We don't know any connections between them, but it was like in the air or something. But that's what happened. That's what they did to Talmud scholarship, and others took that into Spain. There are Torah scholars in Spain who took the Tosafists and just sort of went with that dialectic reasoning and ran with it. So the Ramban and the Ritva and the Rashba, these are names maybe if you hang out in Shul long enough, you'll hear people making reference to those names. That the great Rishonim, again, creative, dialectic. The Talmud is global, meaning you can take any piece of Talmud and use it to shed light on any other piece of Talmud, no matter what tractate, and that's what they did. Okay. The period of the Rishonim. And they also just also point out, they also wrote commentaries on other things that were books of Jewish philosophy. Right? Rambam not only wrote a great code of Jewish law, he also wrote a really influential book of Jewish philosophy called The Guide for the Perplexed. And the Rishonim wrote poetry and another thing, and they wrote commentaries on scripture. It was a great period of Torah scholarship, like written Torah scholarship, Chumash scholarship. This is a nice modern edition of sort of the Torah of the Rishonim, of these medieval scholars on the Chumash. The big letters is the Torah, the Pentateuch, and you have Rashi, Ramban, Chizkuni, Sforno, Ibn Ezra, Rav David Kimchi. These are all, people who lived from the year 1000 to 1400. Some in Spain, some in Italy, some in France, some in Germany, and they left behind a tremendous legacy. Interesting, some who say that this, the Rishonim, that they really embraced this for a period of time, some generations, this focus on pshat and the plain sense meaning of Torah verses, which maybe emerged from this medieval European, especially in France, polemic with Christianity, that you had Jews and Christians debating the meaning of Scripture, and that fueled this like kind of renaissance of like Jewish Torah scholarship, and also this particular method of, even though the rabbis tell us that here's another example. So the oral Torah, the Talmud tells us that the legal meaning of certain verses in the Torah might sometimes depart from what we might think the plain sense meaning is. So the Torah says an eye for an eye, but the Talmud understands that to mean monetary compensation. The Torah says don't boil a kid in its mother's milk, but the oral law, the Talmud tells us that means you can't cook, eat, or derive benefit from dairy and meat products that have been cooked together. The Torah says these words that I command you today shall be bound upon your heart. And the oral Torah says that it means tefillin, like we actually take the words and, it's not a metaphor, it's a literal, something literal that we do. All of these could be departures from like a plain sense meaning of the verse, but no, we have an oral Torah, and the legal meaning of these verses is what the rabbis of the Talmudic era understood it to mean, based on tradition or based on their own reading of these verses and understanding of what they meant legally. And that is, Jewish law follows their determination of what these words mean. But there's still something called pshat. There still is something called the plain sense meaning, and we can investigate that and study that, and that's worth cultivating as an independent value, separate from like what the rabbi said these words mean, the legal meaning. So some sort of scandalous examples. Rashbam, Rabbi Shlomo ben Meir, was one of Rashi's grandsons. He actually, in his commentary, he said, I studied Torah with my grandfather, Rashi, and I showed him my ideas, and he told me that I was right. And he told me that if he had a bit more time, he would have rewritten his commentaries to agree with me. So I don't know, you gotta take his word for it. So he was a real exemplar of pshat, of the plain sense meaning, even if it departed from what halakha, what Jewish law is based upon. So he says the psukim, the verses in the Torah that describe tefillin, factories, right, are like the plain sense meaning of these verses. It's a metaphor that we should think about the Torah a lot. It should be a guide for us, on our heart and between our eyes. It's a metaphor. He wore tefillin. Like the legal meaning is you wear tefillin. That's what these verses mean legally. But in the realm of pshat, that's always open to us to open the Torah and to figure out what it means. And all, there are no doors that are closed. He said, even though legally in Jewish law, day begins at sundown, right? Today is Tuesday, the 12th of the month of Av, right? Is that right now? Monday was the 11th. Tuesday is the 12th. Today is Tuesday, the 12th of Av. Yom Shlishi, right? When tonight it's going to be the 13th of Av, right? At nightfall, and we know this because the Torah says Vayerev Vayiboker, right? It was evening, it was morning. Day 1 is evening, was morning. Day 2, that's how the Torah in Genesis describes these first 7 days of creation. So that doesn't mean that the days began at night. That just means it was evening, and then it was morning of the next day. Days begin at the morning, not the evening. That's what those verses mean. Now, of course, he also dated his contracts the same way we do, and he counted his days the way we do. He just didn't think that the plain sense meaning of those verses has to correspond to Jewish law. That was another interesting kind of facet of the Rishonim. I don't want to digress too much, but any questions or comments on anything I said so far? I'm speaking kind of fast.
Why is it wrapped on the arm if it's supposed to be on the
heart? And you can't really wrap it around your heart, really, so it's on the arm adjacent to your heart.
It points towards your heart.
So it's near your heart. It also says, it also says bind them, tie them on your hands, on your arm. So it's on your arm and on your heart, so that the way you do that is to have it on the part of your arm that's adjacent to your heart. Unless you're left-handed, then it's on the other side. I don't know how that works.
It's always tricky, I remember, because you have to have the knot connected to the box.
Yes.
And the box facing your heart, and sometimes it shifts.
It takes practice. It takes practice. Like anything else, okay? It takes practice. It's okay. It's not so hard.
Clear sleep. Forget about it.
That's another approach. There's a book of Jewish law for left-handed people, because all the occasions in Jewish law, where there's a difference between your left hand, your right hand, your left or right. Like, what do you know? So sometimes it's reversed for a left-handed person, sometimes it's not. And so the book goes through all these cases and tells you what to do. So.
Does it begin with which shoe you're supposed to tie first in the morning?
I don't remember where it begins. It goes through all details of Jewish law, where there is some sort of where handedness or where left or right is discussed, and it sort of just tells you like when it's, when it depends on the individual, what his or her handedness is. But eventually the period of Rishonim comes to an end, and even last week we talked about the Shulchan Aruch as a very influential code of Jewish law. It was written as a digest. The Shulchan Aruch was written as the Reader's Digest version because the Yosef Karo, the author, his magnum opus, his great work, is the Beit Yosef, which is this long, brilliant, encyclopedic commentary on the Torah. The Torah is an earlier code of Jewish law, and he wrote this magnificent commentary on it, where all the sources are quoted and analyzed and explained, and it really is a magnificent work. And then he thought, let me write a simple book so that you can read through. If you read, if you spend 20 minutes a day, you'll read through the whole thing in every couple of months. That was his agenda, and that was called the Shulchan Aruch, the set table, everything we laid out. I'm not going to quote sources. I'm not going to give you arguments. I'm just going to, tell you, the bottom line law in a very simple way. That book itself became the new nucleus for a whole other sort of constellation of commentaries that sort of sprung out around it, so I guess his goal of providing an easy to read, so it's like it's 10 or 15 volumes this size at this point, and here's what it looks like. So the big letters in the middle, that's his Reader's Digest version of Jewish law, and then 2 or 3 centuries of commentary that surround it. And most importantly, Rav Moshe Isserlis in Krakow wrote an Ashkenazi. Yosef Karo, the author, was from Spain. He moved to Tzfat in northern Israel, but he represented the Sephardic heritage that's weighed more heavily in his deciding of Jewish law. Rav Moshe Isserlis in Krakow wrote just a few glosses, a few words here and there, and our practice in our lands, in the Ashkenazi communities, is different in this way, this way, this way, this way. And by doing that, he turned this book into one that's universally relevant. Because any Jew can, Ashkenazi or Sephardi, can open it up and find, guidance. So, the Shulchan Aruch, just there it is, tells you what to do, and then in a few places you have the Moshe Isserlis pointing out for Ashkenazim, and here's how our practices are different, reflecting the halachic traditions and halachic scholarship of those, German communities. Between the 1400 and 1600, the 15th, 16th, 17th century, you have the communities in Germany mostly being expelled. For Germany and France, those communities are mostly expelled and suffer terrible persecution, and for the most part, or to a great extent, to a significant extent, they move to the east, to Poland, and then even farther east in Poland. And the Jews in Spain are also expelled, and Portugal also expelled, and they end up in North Africa and Turkey, and some in Italy, and in Eretz Yisrael, a few in Egypt. And so when the Sephardim were in Spain and the Ashkenazim were in France, they're really pretty close together. But as they were kind of moved to the east, and then the Ashkenazim moved to the east and the Sephardim moved south and all over the place, the communities diverged somewhat. I think the traditions kind of parted a little bit. Another thing that happened in this period of time is that Torah scholars felt less confident deriving creative legal meaning from the Talmud itself. And so I mentioned that Rishonim, a few cases in the Talmud of people taking salted fish and heating it in certain ways. We have a rule, ein bishul achar bishul, you can't cook something twice, and the Rishonim felt competent, learning new things, and discovering new things from the Talmud. The Achronim, the later scholars, did that much, much less, and their halachic creativity was focused on the Rishonim. And so Rav Yosef Karo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, in his magnum opus, the Beit Yosef, he is quoting Talmudic passages and analyzing them, but a lot of what he's doing is quoting the Rishonim. He's quoting the early generations of the medieval scholars. So he's quoting scholars from the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th century, 14th century, and he's analyzing them and debate and weighing them between each other and providing what he thinks is the correct resolution of their disputes. but he's doing much less, Talmudic commentary, deriving new information, new discoveries from his Talmudic scholarship himself. And so maybe that's one way to sort of see that dividing point between the Rishonim and the Achronim is, what are they commenting on? What are they writing? If you're writing a commentary on Talmud, you are probably, you may very well be a Rishon. Okay, if you're writing a commentary on a Rishon, then you may be an Achron. Okay, that's if you're writing a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, that's what the Achronim do. The classic Achronim, they wrote commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch itself. A few names here: the Shach and the Taz. Very important 16th century, like early 16th, 17th century, early commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch. Both of them from Poland. Very influential. There's a work called the Pitchei Tshuva, which goes through, which I love. It goes through the Shulchan Aruch, section by section, and provides a digest of the responsa literature on that topic. Okay, the responsa literature, in addition to codes, in addition to commentaries, another genre of halachic literature is responsa, in Hebrew she'elot u'tshuvot, questions and answers, which has always existed from the Geonim in early medieval period, later on, sending those letters on those trade routes between Baghdad and Spain. That genre of literature has continued. People writing questions, people writing answers, so the Pitchei Tshuva, one of the commentaries on the page of the Shulchan Aruch, tells you, okay, here's a topic in the Shulchan Aruch. So this topic came up in this, and this, and this really important piece of the responsa literature. That's a way to sort of update the Shulchan Aruch from the 16th century. It was written until like the 18th century when the Pitchei Tshuva was printed, and as well in this edition of the Shulchan Aruch. So that also again makes it further relevant, added relevance, because as it's sort of each topic, you try to codify something and distill and simplify, and here's a simple code, and then once you do that, it's just inevitably there's an explosion of commentary for new cases and nuances and excluded cases and new realities, and how are our ovens like their ovens, and how are our foods like their foods, and what's the difference, and just an infinite variety and sort of development of these cases. So far so good. Eventually, so some recent, people stopped writing as many commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch itself. There was two early 20th century commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, one called the Aruch HaShulchan, another one called the Mishnah Berurah. These are names you may hear, early 20th century commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, parts of the Shulchan Aruch. By and large, in the last 100 years, I can't think of any commentary on the Shulchan Aruch itself that's been written in the last 100 years, which maybe means we're in the post-Achron stage of Jewish, Now the genre that's really popular is topical books or compendia, to take one topic and write the book about that topic. So you have Shmirat Shabbat Kehilchata is a 3-volume, 2-volume, the 3rd volume came out later, everything you want to know about Shabbat, an encyclopedia of the laws of Shabbat. And there are dozens and dozens of other books in English as well of the laws of this, the laws of that. So it's not trying to be comprehensive, but it's sort of distill again. It's the same process of so much information, so much response literature, so much new developments. Let's now survey it all and then distill it and write a new guidebook, just on that one topic. And that's a very popular genre. Even and there now, it's gotten to a point where people write books about things that it's almost like a joke, the things that. Like Hagba and Galila, how after we read the Torah in the synagogue, the Torah is lifted and displayed, the parchment is displayed for the congregation. So I think there's a big 2-volume book about all the laws of Hagba and Galila. Nobody knew there were any before, but somehow, if you want to make your mark, you want to find something that people haven't written about before, and so that's a way to do it. Another sort of way that another sort of genre that's really developed and expanded also in recent years is that she'elot u'tshuvot, the responsa literature, has really continued to develop, and contemporary Torah scholars are still engaged in questions and answers, and then publishing them as that happens. So I just took off the shelf a few. This is 1 volume. It's also maybe a 10-volume work called Tzitz Eliezer. That's what he named his collection of questions and answers. The author is Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, who is no longer alive. I'm fairly sure he died, though, relatively recently, within the last 5 years, I think. And I don't know, sort of. Okay, right. So Beirur halacha b'din haflaga b'sfina b'shabbat, v'hanista'ef mizeh l'din haflaga b'aviron v'hayitziyah. So and then nisiyah b'rakevet haminaheget al yedei akum. So two-part question. Analyzing the old halachic topic of traveling on a boat on Shabbat, which is discussed in the Talmud actually, and then from once we explore that topic, he then goes on to discuss traveling on an airplane on Shabbat. If you get on the airplane before Shabbat, it takes you someplace, and now it's Shabbat. When you land, can you get off the plane? If you do get off the plane, where can you go? What are you supposed to do? Where are you supposed to be? And then second part is traveling on a train on Shabbat that is being driven by a non-Jew, right? You say a non-Jewish conductor is driving a train on behalf of a majority non-Jewish passengers. No one is violating their. No one's doing anything they're not supposed to do. Everyone is doing, right? They're not. No one is violating their Sabbath in operating this train. So can you just hop on and for the ride? You're shaking your head, and absolutely not.
Nope, it's not in the spirit of Shabbos.
Not in the spirit of Shabbos.
And
Okay.
there's added malacha from your weight of being on the
Your
train.
weight causes extra.
It's incremental, but
incremental. It may be infinitesimal. I don't know. What if? Is it so different from hopping in an elevator when somebody else pushes the button and goes up and down? What if it's a system where you don't have to pay, or you pay monthly pass, or what if it's a city where the outbound is free, and what if it lets you get to shul? What if it lets you visit a sick person in the hospital who's across town, or you're a doctor and it lets you get home after your shift ends 9 p.m. Friday night, or your shift ends 5 p.m. Friday night, but it's the winter in Chicago and Shabbat starts at 4:30. Can use it to get home. I basically agree with you. It's not like a good idea, but it's easy to say it's not a good idea but he wrote several pages analyzing the cause. There are also just circumstances where you might want to permit it, and maybe it would be permitted. So I haven't read it. I don't know what he actually says about it, but there's a story that there was a rabbi he had a very popular outreach shul where it was really bursting at the seams, and people were really being turned on to Judaism for the first time in their lives, and many people were in a significant way changing their lifestyles in a direction of more Jewish observance, and so he wanted to, but the people who lived too far, right? So he wanted to operate something called the Shabbos, which would be a bus with a
Just stops at every stop.
Stops at every
Just
stop,
like
no
the
matter what. He's not
Shabbos
stopping,
elevator.
right. There's a non-Jewish driver. He stops at every stop, even if no matter if anyone's there or not. Bring people to the shul, and I think the rabbi wanted to do it, but he was nixed by.
It seems like if a Shabbos elevator is okay, then that should be okay too, because I just don't see the difference.
Susiega Torah. You gotta put a fence on the Torah.
Fence around the Torah, yeah. Maybe also something nice about. I think there's something. The risk would be losing the. I think that everyone living within walking distance kind of aspect of Jewish community, and I think South observant Jews who live within walking distance of their synagogue and walking distance of their community enjoy a degree of social capital and kind of neighborliness and community that most other Americans haven't experienced since the 1940s, 1950s, since suburbanization. And if you read Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone, and all of the follow-up books he's written over the years about Bowling Alone. Bowling is still popular, right? It's a popular pastime in America, but it used to be people bowled on teams, and now they don't do that anymore, right? And he chronicles all sorts of other measures of how often, when was the last time how many of your neighbors do you know? When was the last time you socialized with your next door neighbor? And all of these levels of social capital and kind of neighborliness and community have declined very dramatically in America, between the 50s and the 90s when he first wrote that book, and he's continued to erode since then. So I think there's a really, really powerful thing. You see the playgrounds here, Shabbat afternoon, and it's dozens of people, from the neighborhood, dozens of kids and their parents socializing, interacting, without anything being planned or coordinated, and the fact that you can invite someone over for lunch and you can go and you can accept easily and at spur of the moment, like you run into somebody, you don't have to plan in advance in a hard way. So I think there's a real, so even if the Shabbos would be a good idea, I think the risk would be you would erode that, living in a real community that's a walkable community. I think, the automobile has been very bad for American, for, like community and neighborhood.
It's funny.
This,
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's pretty relevant to the Chicago also. What if you like call an Uber and it's all through your phone, like and on the internet, and you call an Uber to get somewhere on Shabbat before Shabbat starts, and it's like a sizable amount of time. So you could easily get on and then arrive after Shabbat, like shortly after Shabbat starts. But you just hop out of the car with your stuff and like go inside the let's say like a house, like or your home. That would be permissible, right? Just
if you get
because-
no, not
No?
because once Shabbat starts, the driver is still driving on your benefit. Like it's not like a bus or a train where the Jewish minority, they don't care, or the Shabbos where it's making all these stops automatically. He's the driver, she is
Solely
driving
for
for you,
Yeah.
and so you can't do it. There may be look, if you are late, there are grounds for leniency in the case where like unexpected traffic or whatever, you miscalculate how long it's going to take you, because Shabbat doesn't start automatically. Shabbat starts incrementally because there's something called Bein HaShmashot. We'll talk about this later, or I'll say a little bit now, right? We don't know in Jewish law when days begin and end. I just said, they begin at night, but we don't know exactly what that means. Does that mean sunset or does that mean dark? And so something as serious as Shabbat, we're strict on both ends. That's why Shabbat is 25 hours. We start Shabbat at sunset, we end Shabbat when it gets dark. And there's about, depending on where you are, about 30, 40 minutes between, or more maybe, between sunset and when it gets dark. So in that intermediate period between sunset and dark, it's like Suffolk. It's a doubt. Maybe it's Shabbat, maybe it's not. And in a case like Suffolk, we're lenient in these cases where, especially if there's a child there, or, and even if it's an adult, if it's not safe to get out of the car, you can certainly, keep you driving. But in these Ben Shmesher cases, there's grounds for leniency that the driver can keep driving if your Oneg Shabbos, if your ability to enjoy Shabbat is going to be impeded by, right? A Gentile can do things for you in Ben Shmesher if the absence of that would be spending Shabbat in a train station, right? Or, he drops you off by the side of the road and you're like, where am I? Like if it's something dangerous, then that's not even a question, you keep driving. But it's not dangerous, it's just, you won't be in danger, you'll just have no Oneg Shabbos. You won't have an enjoyable Shabbat at all. You'll be, sitting on the bench in a train station all night long. Like that's, instead of eating nice food and sleeping in a comfortable bed, etc. That would be, that could, it's a complicated calculus, multivariable calculus of like what the stakes are and what time precisely it is. But that would, so often those types of situations can be finessed. Yeah, okay. And then maybe you have them open the doors for you so you don't turn on the lights, right in the car during, right?
I haven't.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah,
No,
I know.
I was thinking it actually would have been permissible, but
because he's driving. He's driving for you. He's driving for you.
Yeah.
So, this is the Shalom Shuvot called Yechaveh Dat, written by Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, he is also no longer alive. He died. How long ago? He died in 2013. I think he died before I arrived here, but the year that I arrived here, same year, 2013. I'm pretty sure. He was from Baghdad and he studied in Egypt, and then he was to Israel and was a very important Sephardic halachic scholar. He was chief Sephardi rabbi of the state of Israel, and then after he left his government position, he founded a political party that was extremely influential, and he's one of the his politics was, in my opinion, problematic, and he made some whatever. So maybe an unfortunate divergence, but if there are Jews 1,000 years from now, they will be reading his books. I mean, that I have no doubt about. Really, just a genius. I mean, he encyclopedic knowledge. They say he had like photographic memory, whatever that means. Real brilliance and real compassion. One of his most significant early piece of halachic scholarship was there was an Israeli submarine that sank in the 70s, and he was the halachic scholar who determined that everyone on that submarine halachically was in fact dead, and therefore their statuses could be married, and that was which was it's not a simple task. You need like real scholarship and broad shoulders and compassion to go through that effort. And similarly, he in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, he's the one who went through each of the cases of married soldiers who were dead, killed, or missing, and permitted their wives to remarry, declared them dead, halakhically, even in cases where their bodies were not recovered. And that was, that was obviously not an emotionally easy thing to do, and again, tremendous halakhic scholarship and a lot of compassion. That scholarship was actually utilized, and he himself was consulted as well. He was after September 11th, and there were maybe a dozen cases of married men who were killed in the World Trade Center whose wives turned to the Beit Din of America for help in determining their status, and every single case was studied and evaluated, and they had to determine with certainty that these men in fact were dead. And each case was different. Some was easier to determine, like if they made a phone call from a place where no one survived and no one could have survived, that was pretty easy. There was another case where it was a little harder. They found out from the guy's credit card records that he had purchased a MetroCard, and then they found out that particular MetroCard was swiped at the particular subway station, and that there were then subways that came to that station that brought him to his place of work in time to be in his office before the planes hit, and that was also deemed sufficient. So it's not simple things, really important, obviously really crucial, and that's Avad Yosef. Also really groundbreaking stuff on electricity on Shabbat and as well. Okay, who else do I have? What else did I bring to talk about? Do this one. This is Igrot Moshe, the Letters of Moshe, written by Moshe Feinstein. There were 7 volumes that were published in his lifetime. An 8th volume was published after he died. He lives in the United States. He died in the 1980s. And for the 1950s through his death, he was the premier halakhic scholar in the United States during a really tumultuous period for American Orthodoxy, establishing Orthodoxy as a viable movement in the United States, that halakhic scholarship could exist here, could thrive here. Real sensitivity. There's a story that in the yeshiva where he sat, a few stories about, he sat, he had a seat in the Beit Midrash, let's say it was right here, and where Yonadav was sitting, there was a fellow whose name was Moshe. And so somebody would walk in and said, "Oh, hi Moshe, hi Moshe," and Moshe Feinstein looked and said, "Oh, hi," no one was referring to him, "Oh, hi Moshe, how are you doing?" But he had no pretense. He was a humble man, and he was like, "Oh, he didn't," he was like, "Oh, hi, hello." He thought they were talking to him in that casual way. Another story is that he brought in a little, some mandelbrot maybe, or a piece of pound cake to the yeshiva to celebrate one day. And said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I finished learning through the entire Babylonian Talmud. I thought it'd be worth bring some cake in." And he said, "Oh, I didn't really it's the first time you've actually done this." I said, No. I thought maybe the 101st time would be worth, do something different. So that's the story. But you see it also in his writing as a case. One of the most dramatic of his shuvot concern. This is when he was younger. Actually, I don't think he was older than I am, and he was in a town in Soviet Russia in 1920. So there were very few rabbis left in Soviet Russia in 1925. It was a very hard time for Jewish life, a very hard time for rabbis, and you didn't have colleagues, didn't have older colleagues to consult with. It wasn't easy to communicate. It concerned a woman who could not. The doctor told she couldn't go underwater without some earplugs, and so the question was, could she go to the mikveh? Immersion in a mikveh requires no chatzitzot, no barriers between your body and the water. To remove rings, remove earrings, whatever. And so she had these earplugs in her ear. So he, in a very, very long tshuva, very long piece, page after page after page of analysis, concludes that it is in fact permissible for her to go into the mikveh. And then he says, and in response to somebody who challenged him, and this is sort of breaking with precedent, he said, "God forbid that you should just decide halakhic questions based on precedent. That," he says, "is the death of of Torah, and it's forbidden to just rely on precedent, what was done before. Everyone has the obligation to go back to original sources, learn from the beginning, go back to the Talmud, go back to the Mishnah, just learn the sugya, learn the topic from the ground up, and reach your conclusions. And that's the obligation. You can't just say, well, this seems to be the consensus of the prior generations. But that boldness was connected to tremendous, tremendous scholarship. And he didn't just say that in the mikvah. He said that and then wrote page after page after page justifying why she could go to the mikvah, and then several more tshuvot responding to people who would disagree with him. Some very famous tshuvot of his. He permits milk to be consumed in America, even though the Talmud says that Jews can only drink milk that a Jew was present when the cow was milked, to make sure it's only cow's milk. He says in America, the government supervises dairy production, and we can rely on that to drink milk that a Jew was not physically present when the cow was milked. He permits artificial insemination, which was a pretty dramatic tshuva, not universally accepted, but sort of bold and valuable, important tshuva, and countless other really important. There's also some very strict. He had some, he was really against. He was against enticing, encouraging people to violate Shabbat, even for the sake of their own Jewish education. So he said a synagogue can't have a popular youth program if it will encourage kids to be driven by their parents to the synagogue on Shabbat. You can't invite somebody to your home for Shabbat meal if you think they're going to drive. So he was strict too. But Tzitz Eliezer actually disagreed with that particular position that Tzitz Eliezer disagreed with.
Strict with the Erev.
Strict positions on the Erev in Manhattan. He's right. Strict. He had some strict. He had some lenient positions also in Erev, but he had some strict positions on Erev. Couldn't have an Erev in Manhattan. But a real special person. Two more. I don't know. I love this stuff, as maybe you can tell. This is Shad Tshuva by B'nai Banim. This is the 4 volumes of this book, written by Rav Yehuda Herzl Henkin. B'nai Banim means the response of the grandson, the grandchildren, because his grandfather was Rav Yosef Eliyahu Henkin, who was a major, major American scholar, posek, before Moshe Feinstein kind of was prominent. So his grandson is also an important Torah scholar. He lives in Israel, although he's not been well. I think I don't know if he's writing anymore. I think he's had some health issues, but he's still alive. And really great stuff. Buying Sifrei Kodesh, buying books for shul from black market money. Sort of various ha'arot, various sort of details regarding the laws of returning lost objects. I'm flipping through really randomly. Is the mitzvah to settle land of Israel a rabbinic mitzvah or a biblical mitzvah? Okay. He has a very important, some sort of influential tshuvot on Henkin on men and women sitting together at a wedding. His wife is also actually is a formidable Torah scholar. She's the dean of Nishma, which is an important institution of women's Torah scholarship in Jerusalem. So he talks about his own wedding with her and how they made her sit outside at the Shefet Brachot, and she objected, so they brought her in, and that tells that story in his essay in that section. And he's still alive, so that's also he's still alive. And one other sort of in that category still alive. Again, this is these are important people. There are many others I'm not sharing. This I've been teaching from it here in shul between Mincha and Maariv, and so after Shachrit and weekday davening. I sort of been reading from this collection of tshuva. This is by Rav Nachum Rabinovich, who is a Rosh Yeshiva at Ma'ale Adumim, a yeshiva in Israel, and really interesting. I don't know. I find it. He is. He writes in a very clear, short style, which is why it's good for me to use it as a teaching book. And the more I've read, the more impressed I've been with his scholarship and his thinking. He has a very rare and important, lenient position on pregnant women and nursing women on fast days. He says pregnant women should not fast on fast days. which I think makes a lot of sense to me. But again, there's a real scholarship. His major, his more significant books, more larger books. He wrote a commentary on Rambam, on Maimonides' Code, which is I think sort of how he proved his chops, whatever, kind of like. But this is I'm been impressed by this. And in addition to this, is not just halachic literature that we write today. We also engage in Torah scholarship and philosophy. Philosophy. Yeah, there's some, not. Let's say the last 20, 30 years have not been great for Jewish philosophy, but there's some important 20th century Jewish philosophers and writings on Jewish philosophy, Joseph Soloveitcher, of Avram Kook. There are people doing interesting things now in feminist philosophy, like Tamar Ross is really interesting. And Torah scholarship as well. I think there's in the last generation there's been also a new return to like Bible scholarship, Torah scholarship, and within Orthodoxy there's been this like new kind of, called the New School of Pshat, or it's called the literary theological school of Torah scholarship, which is using certain tools of the academy, like literary analysis, like archaeology, and using it, applying them towards Torah scholarship, but with a religious understanding. So still treating scripture as scripture, like this is a religiously relevant book to us, this is a book that God gave to us, but let's use like all of our kind of resources to interpret and understand it, and including like literary analysis and finding chiastic patterns and finding sort of allusions of this story, intertextuality, and all sorts of literary tools like that, and archaeology, and so now that we've returned to Israel and we know where these places are on the geography of the land, we can now understand certain episodes in the Torah maybe better than anyone in centuries and centuries could have understood those episodes. And it's a really exciting time to be, like lots of books are published on this, and lots of conferences and classes. It's a really exciting time as well for like that kind of Torah scholarship. Okay. Any questions or comments or reactions? Okay. I think next time we'll move on to Roman numeral 2, and we'll spend a couple sessions talking about Shabbat, positive mitzvah of Shabbat, philosophy of Shabbat, the prohibitions of Shabbat, and that next time I'm going to be unavailable for a couple of Tuesdays. Which I apologize for. Tuesday the 25th of August. I'm sorry, it's a while from now. We can meet. We could meet either